every story you read, for every song you listen to, for every game you play, there are dozens, if not hundreds, that never see the light of day. This is Creative Project Hypersleep, a series of mini documentaries from Sounds from the Year Between, the official podcast of Skullgate Media. Each episode, an artist digs into their creative closet to unearth a project that they've abandoned. Some of the projects have been truly abandoned, while others have just been set aside until the time is right to work on them again. But I suspect there's as much to learn from these creative dead ends as from their finished counterparts. Maybe even more.
So, like I imagine a lot of other writers, there are more ideas that have gone through my mind and gone through various states of whateverness than I will ever have time to actually do in my life, which is a shame. But I refuse to accept that at some point I will not come back and actually do all of them. My name's Chris Durston. I'm the author of Each Little Universe and a contributor and editor to a bunch of other things, mostly Skullgate Media things. So, buy Skullgate Media's things. I like to call myself an author. I think that's technically true, and I think I'm allowed to call myself that now. So I'm an author. I live in the southwest of England, where it's great and everyone's just like farming all the time, and it's literally the Shire. There aren't actually that many things that I think of as being kind of in hypersleep, in the sense of unlikely to come back to. They are unlikely, but I'm not willing to admit that to myself. But I thought I'd talk about something a little bit different. I don't have a title for it yet. I needed to come up with one, obviously, if I was ever going to actually do anything with it, but its kind of working title was either Wrestlers vs. Cthulhu or God Punch-In. So this is something I think I came up with about 2 years ago, or maybe a bit more. Time's got weird lately, so I'm not entirely sure. But I had this idea for, I think, the setting of a video game initially. I was just talking about it with some friends, and they were like, if you were going to write a video game, where would you set it? And I said, okay, so I would set it in an underground wrestling federation that is running like a storyline about trying to resurrect some sort of elder god and making sacrifices and stuff. But it's increasingly unclear to everyone involved, including the wrestlers themselves, whether it's a storyline or whether something's actually happening. So the idea was that it was going to be sort of 7 or 8 episodes of a podcast. That would be kind of season 1, and hopefully if people liked it, we might do extra seasons, and we might do various other formats of things, like maybe a tie-in, a couple of issues of a comic or a short story and that kind of thing. I guess it was kind of a supernatural comedy / Lovecraftian thingy. I don't know. I hadn't actually written any of the script yet, so I don't know what tone it was going to end up with. But it was the sort of thing that had the potential, I think, like a lot of wrestling does, to be kind of grand in scale, but at the same time very silly. So in wrestling, there's a thing called kayfabe, which is basically the suspension of disbelief, right? It's the idea that the audience is kind of in on it these days. But obviously the wrestlers are acting, they're playing characters, they're not really fighting. Well, they are really fighting, kind of. Read Each Little Universe to hear more about that whole thing. But the point is, they're in storylines, right? They don't actually hate each other. They have worked out the ending to the match in advance, all that kind of thing. The Undertaker isn't actually an undead wizard, sad to say. I mean, he might be, but if he is, that's kind of outside the scope of the fact that he plays one anyway. So I thought it would be cool to explore the idea that there's a bad guy in this wrestling promotion who just goes off script and starts kind of doing things that most of the audience and most of the other wrestlers even assume are part of the show, but it kind of increasingly seems like maybe this isn't part of the show, but the guy running the show is kind of beholden to some other mysterious force and isn't sharing very much information. So a couple of local wrestling fans start this investigative podcast into what's going on at, I think it was called Death Zone Wrestling. So I really love wrestling, right? I think wrestling is great. Or can be great. I'm not saying all wrestling is great, but wrestling as a form has the potential to have great stuff in it. I think wrestling lends itself to being like a facet of an explicitly speculative universe, because then you can get away with all kinds of bizarre things happening and not have to worry about people going, it's not real, because some people think that wrestling fans think it's real, which is probably not true, except for kids, you know. So I was excited to work on this because I wanted to do something different, and I wanted to do an audio drama because I had been listening to some and thought they worked really well. And I thought there's scope to do stuff here that you couldn't do in other media. And that's the kind of thing that really excites me. Like, I have written about video games for a while. A really good video game is the one that does something that could not have worked in any other medium, right? Like, the best video games are the ones that go, okay, what do video games do uniquely? They're interactive, right? So we'll use that interactivity to be part of the way that we tell the story. And therefore, it's uniquely effective as an interactive thing. It probably couldn't even be done in another thing. Similarly, with audio dramas, there's a bunch of kind of, I guess, tricks that you can pull that just don't work elsewhere. And I kind of really wanted to try my hand at that. I'd done some audio drama in uni anyway, like on the student radio and that kind of thing. And so I thought this would be really cool. And I enlisted the help of a friend who was really into audio dramas as well, and who kind of had some ideas about how we could maybe do a Patreon or a Kickstarter or that sort of thing to fund it. And I was just super excited to tell a story about wrestling, because I was like, you know what, wrestling is a larger than life thing. Let's tell a larger than life story about a larger than life thing, and it'll be really cool. We got as far as actually writing out outlines for each episode and then revising those a few times, and then there's a bunch of index cards that lay out every scene in every episode. So the whole thing is plotted but not scripted, and there's a few reasons that it got dropped. One is that lockdown happened, which suddenly changed, a lot of things. Another is that I have a really bad habit of just picking things up that kind of seem new and shiny and interesting, and anything else kind of got shunted to the side a little bit. So I'm really, really good at saying yes to starting stuff and really, really bad at finishing all that stuff, which is a character flaw, but, keeps things fresh, I guess. And the third reason that this show never ended up materializing is that I realized I had no clue how to practically, logistically actually make it happen. I'm still hopeful, actually, because I've made some new connections lately who are a bit more versed in this kind of thing, but I'm still hopeful that I might eventually be able to, write the script and then maybe push it to someone who has production experience and can find actors and can get all that stuff sorted. But it's just something I have no way of doing on my own. If I can sell the script or something, or just find someone to help me out with it, then it could still happen. Or there's a possibility that parts of it might end up being reused for something else. And this is something I do all the time too. There's a whole epic fantasy series that I had plotted a few years ago that I just decided, I'm never going to write this. It's not really that good. But a lot of different elements from the world building are coming into play now in other things that I'm doing. I'm like, okay, well, this works here, so let's just borrow it. We're not going to use it. So it's not even like I'm plagiarizing myself. I'm just taking an idea that I had before and moving it somewhere else into a new setting. It's recycling, and that's efficient and good for the planet. I do think I actually learned a weird amount from doing the plotting side of it, because I had not taken such a structured approach to plotting before, because I hadn't really done anything collaborative before. These days, in the last year and a bit, I've had a lot more experience of working with other people and being, I think, partly for their benefit, but just partly because it just makes things go a lot smoother if you're all kind of being a bit more organized about how you do, and especially how you share things. So I'm a bit better at structuring things now, and using beat sheets and, actually writing down ideas and storing them rather than just putting them in notes on my phone or something. This audio drama thing was the first time that I actually tried to do it in kind of a structured way, because I thought that it would just be a good thing to do, I guess, and because I thought that it was less simple, or likely to be less simple, to write 7 or 8 episodes of a show without knowing what each of those was going to cover than it is to just write a novel of indeterminate length. I don't know, keep your eye out, maybe one day, or your ears out, maybe one day you'll be able to listen to it, or it'll appear somewhere. I hope so, because I thought it was really cool and I liked it a lot. It was mysterious, it was funny, it was over the top, it was kind of ridiculous in all the ways I really like. I have one book out at the moment which is called Each Little Universe, and you can find that probably best just to go to chrisdurston.com to find that. So I've been Chris Durston. You can follow me on Twitter at chrisdurstonish. I have a website, chrisdurston.com. I'm Chris Durston Does Words, I think, on Facebook and Instagram, and I do book reviews as Bite Size Book Review on TikTok as well. I don't know why, I just started doing that.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creative Project Hypersleep. If you'd like to see some of the work that this week's artist didn't abandon, please see the show notes for links. And if you have a creative project that you've put into Hypersleep, we'd love to hear from you. Send an email to editor@skullgatemedia.com, and you could be the subject of a future episode. This series is part of Sounds from the Year Between, a podcast by Skullgate Media, a writing collective that brings creators together to make new and amazing stories. You can find us online at skullgatemedia.com, or check out our flagship anthology series, Tales from the Year Between, at yearbetween.com. Please subscribe, leave a rating or review, or hit the like button depending on the platform you're hearing this, and follow us on Twitter as @SkullgateMedia, for updates on our newest projects. And buy our books. That'd be cool. Thanks for listening.